Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ransomware, Dark Money and Emerging Threats. I am Kristen Hinsberger, the Senior Program Events Manager at ESET North America. Please note this is a live presentation. It is being recorded and will be available following the conclusion of the webcast. For more information on this topic, including a link to ESET's corporate blog, please check out the Attachments tab. And if you have questions for the presenter during the webcast, you can submit them through the Bright Talk question tab at the top, and we will address them during the Q&A sessions. Presenting today's webcast is ESET's Business Product Technical Lead, Michael Aguilar. Michael is a Business Product Technical Lead at ESET North America. He is studying for the CISSP exam and has a Security Plus certification, as well as a Usable Security certification from the University of Maryland Cybersecurity Center via Corsa.org. He is currently responsible for working with large-scale clients for ESET and working with ESET developers, QA, and support engineers to resolve issues with clients in a quick and effective manner. Michael is active on Spiceworks and various security forums, looking at new threat vectors and the best controls to mitigate those risks. And with that, I'd like to welcome Michael to the webcast. I'm going to pass it over to him. Michael?
Perfect. Thank you very much for the introduction. So, okay, going over it, the title is looking at ransomware and dark money and emerging threats. What we're going to cover today is kind of the payment methods and topography of those kinds of infections and exploits, and also some things that are being seen on the horizon with regards to the ransomware threats. So, looking at this first slide, just a quick question and a poll. How many of you have been affected by ransomware in the last 12 months? That's just, again, a 12-month calendar year. How many of you have actually incurred such a threat? And looking at them, it looks like actually we have had about 2/3 no and a third yes. So that's good that if you've not incurred this yet. Currently, there have, actually it looks like some more votes just rolled in. It looks like a lot of you have not kind of experienced this kind of threat, which is good. But there have been a lot of instances where sites, good, valid sites, have experienced handing out this kind of threat and been exploited to hand out this threat. Recently, the EC Council site was affected by Cryptowall virus. Basically, it was handing it out via an Angler exploit kit that affected the PHP code, which basically caused a drive-by download of TeslaCrypt. Branching out, the site PerezHilton.com had two feeds, ad feeds that were compromised and basically downloaded BDEP via a Trojan downloader, and that force-fed the clients a crypto virus. Okay, moving over to our next slide. How many of you have these kinds of controls in place currently with regards to working backup solutions, disaster recovery, an incident response plan if you were able to or did actually incur a virus, a way to locate it, and working shadow volumes that have been tested? That's good. A lot of people seemingly have this control in place or multiple controls in place, so that is good. Having a disaster recovery plan is obviously one of the best scenarios, and actually working backup is even better in case you do incur those kinds of instances. However, a lot of the clients that I've spoken to in the recent past have not. These kinds of items, lacking these items, basically means that if you do incur a virus, you may be running around looking for where it came from, not knowing how to recover, and have no roadmap to recovery. So, what is ransomware? Branching out, ransomware is kind of a blanket term for infections that hold your machine hostage and other aspects of your computer until a fee is paid. Originally, these started as simple lock screens and deterrents that kind of facilitated payment and gave you access to your machine once you paid them without encrypting your files. In 1989, actually, the AIDS Trojan, otherwise known as PC Cyborg, was one of the first kinds of infections that actually was a recorded ransomware infection. After 90 boots, it basically started hiding directories and encrypted file names. and involved sending about $189 to Panama in order to get your files back. After that, other viruses started hitting and making use of further encryption algorithms, such as GP code and CryZip, and those again started showing advanced usage of the RSA encryption algorithm. So right here you have an instance of GP code showing that it's encrypted your files with a gigabit of RSA algorithm, and in order to get the decryptor tool, contact the maker at X email address. That has changed quite a bit. And again, going forward from this threat, in 2008, moving along the timeline, Revitin was one of the very large and popular infections. Revitin, again, very popular in the 2012 year, displayed a lock screen that stated that you had basically infringed copyright, downloaded illegal material, or conducted some kind of illegal activity, and your machine is now being blocked, and you have to pay X amount to a federal government. The item would be replaced due to locality, Interpol if you're in Europe, and various other aspects of government. But the end result was it stated that you had to pay a ransom to get access to your machine. After paying the ransom, you would just get access to your machine, and files were not encrypted, and these ones were actually seemingly easier to remove. As long as you could get a boot disk, you can remove the infection via logging into the registry from Linux, and then removing the actual file, thusly gaining access to your system without having to go through decryption algorithms. So if you fast forward to today's ransomware, unfortunately things have gotten a little bit more persistent and a little bit more difficult to remove and remedy. So going over, how many of you have actually looked at user permissions, I guess, within the last 12 months? Wait a minute for the votes to roll in. But user permissions and access roles are one of the major things in security that kind of get bypassed. So far, 14 votes have come in, and it looks like most of the people have actually looked at user permissions, which is actually very good. Again, a little bit different from the clients I see calling in, who have not actually looked at user permissions areas in a little while, but we'll touch on that currently. So, ransomware today. So in 2013, we saw an interesting trend and a new infection called Cryptowall hit. This infection seemed to utilize a little bit different algorithms for encryption, and it was heavier and a lot more difficult, if not nearly impossible to break, sometimes up to 2 gigabit encryption, though there have been some variants with even more encryption. Again, as we progressed past 2013, more and more variants started hitting using different techniques and or payment facilitation methods. Tor is normally the preferred method to get payment because it's encrypted communications point to point, and they're requesting cryptocurrencies now like Bitcoin that are harder to track and monitor. Now, the way that these clients get affected is that basically they will start browsing a site that's been affected by an exploit kit. And then once the client visits that site, their machine is then sent information over to the command and control centers, which can determine if it's a valid client for exploit, in which case they'll be sent a package that will either exploit the machine outright and insert the file coder virus, or they'll be sent like some kind of spam or something that they'll click on. Now, the payment facilitation method that they're using, Tor, that was originally developed by the U.S. Navy and DARPA as a way of actually encrypting intelligence communications from point to point through the use of internet relay nodes. And eventually, in 2004, the source code was handed out and open sourced and then collected by the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who's been continuously developing Tor from this point forward. Okay, so moving on, so far the U.S. Internet Crime and Complaint Center, IC3, has received about nearly 7,800 complaints regarding ransomware since 2005, and of that, about $57.6 million in damages have been recorded. And then the ransoms paid were normally in the range of about $200 to $10,000, and additional costs were normally due and incurred by dealing with the attacks and the estimated value of the data loss because of the downtime. And then in 2015 alone, the ransomware victims paid about over $24 million across nearly 2,500 cases, and again, reported by the IEC3 and released in March of 2016, that information was. So that brings us to one of our more noted cases of ransomware attacks. Most recently, in February, the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center was affected by a crypto virus. They actually had to pay $17,000 to restore their files after that ransomware attack. So that's one of the larger ransoms that have been hit, and also it signifies the targeted attack of businesses that are vulnerable to these instances. And then moving forward, this is an interesting slide. About 30% of people that were queried in a poll that was conducted did not know actually what ransomware was, which is kind of an interesting fact considering it's been all over the news. 42% of those users didn't know whether their ISP or their internet security solution helped them against ransomware. And also in that instance, 31% of people never backed up their files. So if anything were to go down, a virus or other, basically once they tried to restore, there would be nothing to restore to because they didn't have any good safe backups. Then moving on to, I guess, the horizon of these kinds of instances are attacks against mobile phones, Apple OS X, and other variants that are seemingly pretty alarming. You would think that by stemming the communication, which a lot of solutions have been popping up, that you would be able to stop the communication with the command and control center and block the key exchange. The Lashif variant of ransomware basically does not need internet access to encrypt your files. So having a solution in place that would block that communication, in this instance, if you incurred the Lashif malware, would not really do much. The files would still be encrypted, and there is really no need for internet access to be able to encrypt the files in that instance. Affecting OS X is the Keranger, or otherwise known as Key Ranger. There's multiple different identifications for that, but this variant of ransomware affects OS X clients and requires, again, cryptocurrency through Tor gateway to be able to decrypt your files. This one is actually interesting as well. It's a rewrite of an older known Linux encoder virus, and was actually able to bypass Gatekeeper in the samples analyzed because they had a signed valid Apple certificate that was assigned to a developer in Turkey. So moving on, the question will be, how do I prevent these kinds of infections from attacking my systems and attacking my infrastructure? One of the main things that is being utilized these days is the whitelisting of applications via GPO or Microsoft AppLocker. Now, the setup and infrastructure is a lot of testing. Basically, with a group policy, you can restrict access to applications running from app data. The problem is going to be that you need to test these kinds of GPOs to be able to ensure that they're going to work with your environment. It is very protective and very restrictive, which is the point. But again, some programs, good valid programs, will actually run through there, and that's when you'll need to actually whitelist those applications so that only good, valid, known applications can actually run from that protected area. Further moving down that, you can actually also utilize Microsoft AppLocker, which can actually block items via hash. So if you're heavy on the information security boards looking at new samples and hashes and being provided to those, you can actually pull the hash and then block it via Microsoft AppLocker, so anything matching that hash or not whitelisted will not run. There's also, again, a heavy emphasis on the restriction of user permissions. User permissions come into play in that users have way too much authority on the systems that they're operating than they should. it's an issue that I've seen many a time with many different environments where you get onto the starting point of an infection, especially a crypto virus, looking at who started the infection and wondering how does the front file clerk have access to the payroll department and basically every other aspect of the business. Restricting that and giving them only the least principle of authority, so basically giving them just enough authority to be able to do their work, is a very good model to use and is basically mentioned in most security books and CISSP books with a starting point to starting your roadmap of developing a policy and procedure. The next item I really want to touch on is anti-spam. Anti-spam solutions are great. They block you from getting adware, junkware, emails that have no point in entering your enterprise. But one of the main things that you would want to have is an item that will block dangerous executables and or infections from actually getting to your endpoints. This is going to be an anti-spam solution that has antiviral properties and can scan for malicious packages. Having this in the enterprise is very much needed, and the ability to block malicious attachments from getting to your users is almost golden. Being able to remove a virus from a user's mailbox before they click it is extremely powerful and will save a ton of time with dealing with these kinds of threats because you will not have to deal with the end user actually getting the actual virus. Moving on, another highly recommended item is having two-factor authentication for RDP sessions. I don't know how many tools there are, but there are a large amount of them to be able to scan and actually authenticate to these in a brute force manner. They're very easy to get and they're very easy to use. So, any kind of script kiddie can get their hands on an RDP scanner and be able to try to authenticate against a word list of 1,000 usernames and passwords. So having that second way to authenticate to the system is really recommended and really useful because, again, using those kinds of scanners in an automated fashion, they're now rendered useless because you cannot actually access the RDP session until you have that second piece of information to authenticate against, which they would not be able to gather. Number 5, I also recommend looking heavily into an IDS-IPS solution. The reason being is a good IDS-IPS solution, if you have an IDS solution, it will at least alert you that some kind of communication is occurring between you and a key server. It also definitely restricts the behavior on a network if you have an IPS solution, and that it should hopefully stem any kind of command and control server communications, but also will help block against Trojan downloaders and other things that may be going on leading to your Cryptowall infection. So there's normally a primary infection or exploit that will bring down the cryptovirus, thusly leaving you with a ton of encoded files. And lastly, if you're using our ESET systems, it's highly recommended to enable LiveGrid. LiveGrid is actually our cloud protection engine, and it identifies items before a signature is written, allowing faster response and blocking our unknown objects. The LiveGrid is actually available in all our antivirus products and protects you, again, by predicting trouble before it actually occurs. It uses our ThreatSense.net advanced early warning system, and ESET LiveGrid actually collects data submitted by users worldwide. So it uses that kind of methodology to gather information about unknowns from a wide range of sources versus just one source, such as like honeypots or something. And the amount of information and blocking of viruses that it provides is so useful. It's innumerable the amount of infections we've actually seen stemmed by this. So looking at this is our layout of the ESET security solutions kind of in an enterprise environment. As shown, we do have options for two-factor authentication, encryption, plugins, and cloud repositories, with the addition of items to block FTP and HTTP gateways and scan for traffic in that manner. And then also, again, if you look at our security solutions, we have things for mail servers, file servers, and other aspects such as mobile. Branching off of that, This is somewhat of our technology stack on the endpoints. It shows basically how our technology stack kind of lines up against a layered threat, showing, again, how the network protection, reputation cache, and DNA signatures will look at an object once it comes into your system. But we're going to go over the post-exploit and kind of go over what happens once an item is clicked. So moving over, the first thing we're going to go over is our exploit blocker. What this does is it adds a layer of protection, and it's one step closer to blocking the attack. So basically what this exploit blocker does is it blocks the exploits that a person would use to access your system, so the CVE exploits, Java, Flash, things like that. And if there's an anomaly detected, it will try to block it and or stop it. So any of those CVE exploits that you see written on like stuff like packet storm, items like that, this will help mitigate against protecting somebody from actually utilizing that vulnerability to turn it into an exploit and basically block it from being affected on your network. Moving over to the advanced memory scanner, it's actually technology that's unique to ESET technologies. With modern infection packages, they're highly obfuscated and really guarded with their actual source code, and it may be encrypted at the time of receiving the item. What this does, our ESET Advanced Memory Scanner, is that it emulates and uses some kind of sandboxing to be able to scan the item once it decloaks in operating memory. So the item may be obfuscated and it may be packaged in UPX or some other form of packaging, but as soon as it is clicked and or if an item is like exploited, like say the macros, the item will be scanned and then it works with the exploit blocker to, again, stop the execution of a malicious package. Next, we're going to go over our cloud malware system. This is one of several technologies based on ESET's LiveGrid. And again, this item, as mentioned before, will help block against those unknowns. We aggregate the information from a large source of clients and then can place blocking and protection on multiple machines by just scanning the feeds and seeing what is incurring or being incurred from around the world. Okay, and if you have not already seen in the news especially, ESET has actually provided a decryption tool for TeslaCrypt. The keys were actually seemingly given up by the TeslaCrypt writer for their latest variants, and we were able to translate that into a decryption tool for those kinds of files that have been affected. So if you have been affected by TeslaCrypt version 3 or 4 and have your file extensions .xxx, .ttt, .micro, or .mp3, then go ahead and check out kb6051 at eset.com because we have a decryption tool that you should be able to use and help get your files back. It's very useful, and I can tell you by the amount of feedback I've already gotten online and offline through clients and other that it's working and definitely helping. A great amount especially. Okay. At ESET, we're actually able to provide a good backup disaster and recovery solution with very competitive terms through our partnership with StorageCraft. Now, the StorageCraft solution is an image-based backup and recovery software. It takes a snapshot of your entire system, OS, settings, applications, files, folders, about every 15 minutes. You can actually back that image up locally, or you can actually back it up to a cloud, which is my preferred method, using StorageCraft Cloud or any kind of data center, such as Amazon EC2, Azure, or other. And what this does is it allows you to have access to your files even if your entire infrastructure, like your local site, is down. You can even use the image boot to boot an image of a machine in mere moments as compared to getting a full backup of a secured state to good known media, so a bare metal recovery. So as mentioned here, it's fast and light, so just like ESET, which is exactly why we kind of partner with them. And the SPX console is pretty easy to use. I was able to pick it up in about less than a week of just reading through some literature. It's actually really convenient. It's pretty flexible, again, in that you can back up to a data center if you have availability to one, or again, if you have access to the Amazon cloud, which is my preferred method, you can go ahead and just toss everything up there. It's also, again, one of the main things is it's independent of hardware. So you can use any kind of hardware, Dell, HP server, it doesn't matter. As long as you have the hardware, it's reliable and it's dependent. And again, it works when you need it. So if you need to get access to a file in a quick, effective manner, you actually can do that without having to recover everything first. If you need to quickly boot to the image, you can just boot the image, grab the files you need, and then go from there. You can even just log in online and get access to your files in that regards as well. Okay, I highly recommend that if you're looking for any kind of security or storage craft solution, that we have a technical demo Friday, May 27th at 10 to 11. Links to sign up are in the attachment section, but I highly recommend that you do attend this if you are looking for a backup solution. It's going to be very informative and really will kind of go over a lot of stuff having to do with the storage craft recovery solution. Again, if you do not have one in place, it's highly recommended to go ahead and attend this. It's going to go over a lot of information and go over a lot of use cases for having this kind of solution in place.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael, for all that information. That was a lot of really good information in a really condensed amount of time, so I want to make sure that everyone has time to enter their questions. I already see a bunch coming in up there. So as a reminder to the audience, please enter your questions in the BrightTalk screen for the Q&A sessions. Also, again, for more information on this topic, please look at the attachments tab at the top. And we do have one last polling question here, so you can answer this polling question at any time during the remainder of the webcast. So if you would like to request one of the following, you can do it at this time. So you can request ESET Endpoint Security Technical Demo. You can request a Storage Craft Technical Demo. You can request a business trial. You can request contact from ESET Sales, or you can request information on becoming a reseller partner or MSP. Again, no rush through the remainder of the Q&A session. You can answer this polling question. And let's see, it looks like we've got some questions in there. So, Michael, I'm going to pass that back over to you to answer some of everyone's questions. Are you seeing those questions in there, Michael?
Yes, I am. I'm just scrolling down to the first one.
Okay.
The first one we have is, are all industries affected by ransomware, or are some more than others? Really, to tell you the truth, with the amount of spam and campaigning going on with this infection, it's anybody. If you're connected to the internet, then you are potentially affected. They don't target in that kind of manner. There are targeted attacks, and they do occur, such as the Presbyterian Church, the Presbyterian Hospital, but I would say if you have any node connected to the internet, with the span of these exploit kits going out there, basically you can be affected by it. Okay, moving on, we have a question on why is the variant called Lashif? I'm not sure why the variant received that name, but I'm thinking that it had either something to do, like normally, with a string found in the code, or possibly it was a take on the James Bond film that had the villain Lashif that had all the money in the James Bond series. Okay, moving along, can you discuss more about two-factor authentication for RDP sessions? RDP, what does that acronym stand for? So RDP is the Remote Desktop Protocol, normally found on port 3389. It's very easy to find out what machines are running Windows because, again, if you're doing any kind of scanning or any kind of pen test on the network, you'll easily see 3389 open on a lot of Windows machines because that's the default connection port. It is a very easy port to be able to log into. So if you see 3389, all you have to do is point a remote desktop client to it. It will automatically connect and it'll be brought up to the login prompt. And then once you're at the login prompt, if you don't have a two-factor authentication in place, then you can just brute force that area to be able to log in with multiple different usernames. Now, protecting this with two-factor authentication means that, so you'll log in with a username and password. Secondarily, you'll then be presented with a prompt for a string of characters, numbers and or letters, numbers in our case, in which case that's another way to authenticate. Now, the way that it's protected is that the cipher to get those numbers is not known. So the attacker would have no way to attack that infrastructure to be able to even recover those numbers, which is why two-factor authentication is a very heavy piece for RDP sessions, and very useful too. Okay, moving on to the next question. What is a honeypot? A honeypot is a machine and or virtual machine that's been purposefully set up to be exploited. Security researchers and companies and just people who are interested in vulnerabilities and such will set these up and put them on the general internet so people can scan them and or exploit them, and then once it's been exploited and or infected, you take it offline and you look at the mechanisms used to be able to affect that machine. So it's a very vulnerable machine that is basically used as a as a mechanism to lure an attacker in and view how they're reacting or what they're doing in an environment. So similar to luring a bear with honey or Winnie the Pooh, it's an easy way to be able to view the mechanisms an attacker uses during an actual attack. Okay, and then moving on to the next question, how do we block infections coming from Gmail? You can't really search Google's SSL encrypted connections. Through items coming from Gmail, that's part of the problem of not hosting your own exchange. If you don't host your own exchange, then you have to rely on what the provider provides for a solution for anti-spam or anti-malware. So in that regards, there's not really much you can do. However, with the ESET applications, if you have an item like Outlook, and ESET endpoint installed, we have an Outlook add-on that will attach to your Outlook inbox, and then you can scan emails that way. If not, and you're a business, I highly suggest moving to a hosted exchange, one that you can manage on your own. Okay, and then moving on to the next question. How many minutes does it take for a full backup? It's really dependent on the amount of data that you're backing up. However, it's not too much about the backups. I would say if you're doing a virtual backup, it's just booting. So you literally just need to boot the item, and it takes a few seconds. And that's using their virtual boot technology. If you need to do a full backup, it would probably take anywhere from about 15 to about 30 minutes, again, depending on how many files you have on that particular system. Okay, moving on, we want to know, how do you know if the ESET cloud protection is turned on in our ESET? The easy way is to be able to look into the settings and then validate that you have LiveGrid enabled. So if you're in version 5, you're going to be able to press the F5 button, go into your advanced settings, and ensure that you have LiveGrid enabled. And same thing in version 6. And actually, there's a search function up top, and if you just search for LiveGrid, just ensure that those settings are on. You don't have to send statistics or anything, but enabling LiveGrid on your endpoints will be able to help block the unknown threats. Okay. Next question is, have you seen any instances of crypto-infected phones infecting Windows domain networks? Not yet, but I would see that as a very viable attack scenario. Reason being is if somebody plugs in, especially with a Windows phone, something into the domain similar to a USB attack, I don't see why they would not be porting that over to that attack vector. Pretty much every attack that I've seen lately has been turned into a USB attack vector as well. So they should be, or they probably will be branching out into that into the future. So again, having stuff like USB blocking rules using our ESET applications would be viable and helpful in that kind of scenario. Okay, let's see. Is the recovery impacted by the PC being already encrypted by BitLocker or some other encryption? Not really. The recovery of the files will be about the same. You just need to look in the shadow volumes and see if there is a shadow volume still enabled. However, recovery from those machines that already have encryption, I'm thinking it may incur an issue with the like if we have a decrypt tool for that, due to the fact that there's multiple encryption algorithms in there. But it probably, with regards to it recovering, like having issues with recovery, you won't have any issues because, again, the item will already be affected by the heavy encryption of FileCoder and your own encryption, so it'll just be an overlay of that. What are your thoughts on a tool like OpenDNS? I've seen OpenDNS used in a couple sites. It has been both a blessing and a curse. It will help block items, and I've seen it block a few. However, the problem is going to be that they're developing the infections a lot faster than a solution like OpenDNS. So once OpenDNS is able to block an item like that, then obviously they'll be notified of it, and they'll just rewrite the package, but you'll be still having OpenDNS as a solution. So that's part of the issue with implementing a solution like that. Okay, what do you think about, or what about using other cloud storage and or Google Cloud sites? I utilize the cloud a lot. I think it's fine to utilize Google Cloud sites or cloud storage in general. Just make sure that you have, again, protection mechanisms in place on those servers in the cloud. Even though they're in the cloud, it's just basically somebody else's machine. So you still want to make sure that you have it protected and you have snapshots available. The good thing is, though, that since you're in the cloud, snapshotting is pretty easy, and you can store almost limitless stuff on AWS depending on your storage space and or resources that you paid for in that regards. What is your suggestion if, for example, a server is infected from a workstation? How do you identify the workstation so you can clean it? That's pretty simple. With the FileCoder and ransomware viruses, normally you'll be seeing hits on a server, and it'll just keep generating the how to decrypt or decrypt instructions or various other things that basically state how to decrypt your files. It leads to a payment site. Looking at the owner of those files will generally give you an idea of who executed the infection. So in the case of your file server is reporting that, hey, I'm seeing a bunch of these FileCoder viruses or FileCoder infections popping up. It's actually not the infection, it's just the payment notes that are getting detected. You right-click and go to the advanced properties of those decryption files, take a look at the owner of those files, and that normally will be the owner of the infection. Backtrace over to that workstation, and depending on the variant, you could look in HKey current user in the registry under the software hive, and then see that there is a weird random alphanumeric key in there, and in older variants that would actually show a listing of files that were encrypted. Okay, so next question is, we have a company that's using ESET, getting hammered with ransomware and incoming emails. Most are going to junk and getting caught, but some are going to the inbox. Is there any way to slow this down? Yes, heavily. I would advise, if you aren't already, utilize the ESET mail security application. What this will do is two things. One, it prevents the end user from actually getting the email in that it's scanned with the transport layer before they get it. But two, with the version 6 application, you can actually also scan the mailbox stores. So if you know that somebody had clicked on a Trojan email and then had sent out an email to everybody else containing a file coder virus, you can easily scan your entirety of your businesses and your mailboxes and then pull that virus out through that scan. But my recommendation is to heavily look into an anti-spam, anti-malware solution for your exchange. Getting that out and removed before the user gets it is going to be a very big bonus. Okay, next question is, how good of a backup solution is a nightly backup of data over VPN LAN to a PC in a local location physically removed from our data server? It's a pretty good solution. I mean, backing up to an offsite area is going to be obviously your best bet because it's off your site, and if you have the proper segregation of the network, nothing's going to reach that backup area, which is one of the main things, is that you'd want to make sure that's completely segregated from everything. So you can get the backup up there and then make sure that it's safe and stored and not encrypted, like I've seen some other companies with their backups actually getting encrypted. Okay, which Microsoft anti-spam plugin can I use to improve my protection? We touched on this briefly, but utilizing the anti-spam solution for mail security will be one of the greatest ways to improve anti-spam solutions and basically reduce the level of spam and infections you get in email. The next would be utilizing the ESET add-on for Outlook if you have ESET Endpoint installed. That would definitely help, and that would reduce it on the endpoint level. But again, my biggest recommendation is to implement the mail security application on the Exchange level to get that before the clients actually get the email. Okay, in addition to two-factor authentication in RDP sessions, what about user lockout policies for incorrect passwords? Would that not also add an additional level of security? Depending on your administrators, yes, it would. However, I've also dealt with some administrators who have issues with remembering things. Namely, a long time ago, I was working with an admin, and we were working on a server trying to locate our application, but basically he did not know its topography and didn't know what server we were on. In that regard, it would be good, but I'd rather get the two-factor authentication in place in that you can have somebody else log in case the user gets locked out in that regard. Okay, some clients using email services from Google are being blocked from coming into Exchange server with ESET mail security. Is that protection that potential threats are coming from those email senders? Yes. Looking at the logs, you would want to validate that the action taken by ESET mail security for two things. You'd want to make sure that A, they're not on a block list that you've inserted into the Exchange rules on the anti-spam solution, so you can actually block IPs and or senders. So just make sure that they're not inserted into there. But the second is you can go to an item like MX Toolbox and check the blacklists for that particular sender and ensure that they are not on a blacklist. Although most likely it's probably going to be something local on the server, either that or they may send a lot of spam out from that mailbox. And the next question is, we've seen mostly crypto infections where the encryption software targets file extensions. It is still the case. Can a directory be completely protected by completely removing the file extensions from the given folder? Removing the file extensions would kind of be a hassle in that you'd have to put them back if you needed to use the file again. Also, you need to know what file extensions are in a particular folder, and you can segregate those, but they will go after still the personal files. They obviously do not want to take down the operating system because they still need you to pay them ransom in order to get the files back. They still are going after files with certain extensions. However, just removing the file types I don't think would block against this because there's other metadata attached to those files that they probably will scan for and probably do scan for to be able to determine the widest range of files that they can infect. Okay, moving on to the next question is, can you recommend a cloud-based anti-spam for hosted Exchange? Cloud-based solutions, not really. With Exchange, it's kind of hard to snap in for that item if you host your own Exchange. I've not really run into too many cloud-based anti-spam solutions, but I will be kind of looking on the forefront of those. I do know other items to help block traffic, but not necessarily just based on anti-spam. What protection do you suggest for small business with no Exchange server? That would probably be the ESET Small Business Security Pack. Basically, you can get protection for phones, for file servers, and for endpoints, and it's all bundled together. That'd probably be the best bet for you, and it also has the Outlook add-on included in the endpoint protection aspects. Do you have any ESET products for Chromebooks running Chrome OS? Currently, we actually do not have any kind of solution for Chromebooks, and that's just due to the fact that the Chrome OS is basically kind of like an Android variant that's a little hyped up on steroids, running a lot of threads at once. I do think probably they'll be looking at some kind of solution for, everything up in the future, but Chromebooks being a relatively new technology, I don't think we have anything in place for that yet. Yet being the keyword. Okay. Next, we have a question about ESET version 5. What are the benefits of upgrading to version 6? What is the upgrade process? That I can easily talk on. From version 5 to version 6, there was a lot of change in the product. Version 5, you installed the server and the client for the console, and you would be able to get the ESET Remote Administrator. Now it's more of a distributed application, including SQL, Apache, and some other add-ons to basically create a LAMP stack. What this allows you to do is you can install certain things in places. So say you have your SQL database located in one area, you want to put the server on a different server, and you want to be able to log in from across the globe. Well, as long as you have port 2223 open, you are able to accomplish this. The benefits of upgrading are that it's changed from just reporting every 10 minutes kind of system to a more reactive system. So the endpoint has actually split the communication. So we now have an agent that's conducting the communication, holding the policy for us. Also, the addition of this agent allows for a reactive system. So if we need to push out a command to a client, we can easily set up the command as a task, send a wake-up call, which is a broadcast to the client, and it will report back immediately instead of waiting for the defined check-in period. This helps with reactiveness and viruses, and also for sending commands to clients, which I personally use to scare my wife. I'll send a command saying, can you please log off Facebook? I need to do some work on the machine. Send a wake-up call to the machine, and then it pops up with the command shell, and then kind of causes that bit of panic. Okay, moving on to the next question. Is a browser add-on, ad blocker add-on helpful in a layer of security or not worth it? It could be twofold. It can be useful, but it can also reduce the amount of interaction your clients have with the internet. So you would kind of have to look at your business and gauge, do they actually need add-ons? Do they click on windows to get pop-ups and they need to fill in the secondary form? So once you analyze your business, then you should be able to determine whether an ad blocker will really work for you. I've seen it work in a lot of scenarios, but those are mostly on the consumer side, not really on the enterprise side, because a lot of people on the enterprise really aren't browsing the general internet for fun, at least at work. Okay, how will the ESET integrate with third-party identity provisioning management applications such as Okta? I've not seen any issues currently with us integrating into any kind of provisioning management solutions, but I've not actually had the pleasure of working with the Okta application. So that's something I would have to try, but I really don't foresee any issues if it's a Windows-based application or any other kind of operating system application. We generally work very well with anything. Okay, next question is, does the infected client machine become the host of the virus? Does it stop the infection on the network if you turn off the machine? What happens is it's a client-to-server virus. So it's executed locally on the client workstation, and then it affects the servers. It actually doesn't become a host, as it's not a worm and it's not network aware, so it's not really hosting anything. But again, I touched on user permissions, and it uses the user's permissions and the drives that they're mapped to basically affect the infrastructure. So it doesn't host the virus, but it does actually, the endpoint and the person whose permissions are executing it affect your servers. And also, turning off the client machine can stop depending on what stage of the infection it's at, some aspects of the encryption, but if it's already run the file and it's actually starting to encrypt files, unplugging that machine is basically just going to stop things locally on the workstation, and the task and job and information has already been sent over to the server at that point. Okay, next question is, you mentioned Gmail addresses being blocked. We are seeing that many Gmail addresses are being blocked, and the Gmail IP address that the email came from is listed in MX Toolbox. It doesn't seem that there's any way to avoid this other than adding the address as a whitelisted on the Exchange or AV solution. That would be correct. Looking also at Gmail and their infrastructure, it's going to look like that because, again, Gmail uses the same set of servers for people sending out. So if this person is valid and you need to get their emails, I would definitely whitelist their email. However, mostly, and depending on what AV solution you're using, it may be blocking that in bulk due to the fact of people sending out a lot of spam from Gmail addresses. Regardless, if you need to get email from that user, add them to the whitelist, but obviously do that very sparingly and only with people that you've validated. Okay, lastly, we have a question about data breach. Is there a concern with the data breach? Is data being stolen and not just encrypted? It's dependent on the way that the infection gets there and the infection actually type. Sometimes clients are exploited and basically force-fed a crypto infection. Other times, they have a secondary infection that actually brings down the file coder encryption virus. In the case that there's a secondary infection, something like BDEP, which is a Trojan downloader and a multi-use toolkit, there may be some kind of data that's transmitted, such as usernames or passwords, because, again, it has that capability. In most of the instances, though, that I've seen, there's not been any kind of data lost. It's just the communication to get the key. So most of the time there is not a data breach. However, it depends on the way and the infection that you have. If a secondary infection like BDEP is on the system, you may have lost some data and some passwords. However, if you just have file coder on the system and there's not been any kind of secondary infection located, then most likely you can rest assured that there's not been any kind of data breach. Okay, last question is, you mentioned double-factor authentication for RDP, even within the network. Yes, even within the network. Reason being is if you're able to get an exploit onto the environment and you're starting to pull passwords and such, it's not going to look like a login from natively from offline or outside the domain. It actually may be a login from inside the domain that's causing the issue. So, yeah, you would probably want to apply that for everybody. And luckily, with the prevalence of mobile phones, it's an easy application, and then you can easily pull it up on your phone to authenticate.
Wow, well, that was a lot of great questions, and you answered all of them in there. So thank you so much, Michael, and thank you all for your participation in today's webcast. As a reminder, you can still answer that last polling question if you'd like to request one of the following: the ESET Endpoint Security Technical Demo, the StorageCraft Technical Demo, a business trial, a contact from ESET Sales, or information on becoming a reseller, partner, or MSP. So you can answer that, or you can also rate this webcast or share it through your social media channels in your Bright Talk window. And for more information on the ESET Endpoint Security products, you can go to eset.com. Thank you all, and that concludes our webcast for today.